What's going on, everyone? You are now tuned in to the PA Power Hour, and I am Jeff Upson. I'm joined by someone special tonight. We got Dustin Hockensmith, Penn Live, and Dustin, you and I have been talking a lot about the Super 32 and what's in store for Pennsylvania wrestlers. So I'm curious to get your take on some of these things because I know you're more versed in the District 3 wrestlers, but man, we got a lot of wrestlers from all across Pennsylvania. So Dustin, thanks for joining us tonight.
Man, it's great to be here, and I've been trying to do my homework and catch up with all these other Pennsylvania Hammers who are going to be there who aren't in my backyard. And man, there are some really fascinating guys there and some fascinating weight classes starting right at the top. So I'm pumped to talk about it.
You know, you and I talked about Bo Bassett and what he's capable of, winning a world title and then coming to Super 32. Winning at Flows, who's number one, then winning at True Power, and now he is the number one seed at 106. So we're going to start right there at 106 because we got a long ways to go when we talk about all the Pennsylvania wrestlers that are going to be here at the Super 32. 106 has had some type of, I would say, a little bit of intrigue to it because originally Barrett Jordan was the top seed, and he's now up at 113. But the question on everyone's mind is Knox coming down to 106 because it's been reported by Flo and by Pat Minio that he is supposedly coming down to 106 to try to face Bo, but right now he is still in the seedings at number 3 at 113 pounds. So if that is the case, we're going to have a super match there potentially if that does happen. But for right now, with Jordan going up to 113, what that does is that makes Bo Bassett the 1 seed and Nathan Desmond from Becca the 2 seed. So Dustin, I know you're familiar with Bo, but what were your initial thoughts when you saw the seedings and especially with Knox kind of rumored to be coming down?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw the same thing that you saw with Bo being the number 2 seed, which is hard to wrap your head around considering everything that he's done specifically over the past calendar year. But I think, get the logic that Barrett Jordan was an Ohio State champ. He was a year ahead of Bo. He had certain achievements that Bo just hasn't had the opportunities to get yet. But I don't think there'd be any circumstance right now where I would be betting against Bo Bassett to win a tournament. And obviously nothing really changes now. We'll see if Knox is formally placed in the 106-pound bracket. Maybe the weigh-in has to happen in order for that to be confirmed. But we've seen a lot of flux right now. One thing just in general about the Super 32 that I wasn't familiar with before was just the idea of weight and this being a one-day weigh-in and guys having some incentive to make kind of a mega cut to get down to wherever they want to go because they know they don't have to hold it for too long. But we'll see what happens with Knox and Barrett Jordan, whether that was a case of trying to get a different bracket or maybe 106 was too much for him. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're right in that sense that it's, is it weight? Is it something where I don't know, because I agree with you. And I think, Willie Saylor is the first year he's seeding the tournament. And I can't think of anyone better to seed it just because he has the pulse on all the high school wrestlers in the nation. But Willie, I'm sure his analogy is, look, Barrett Jordan has won high school tournaments. Bo Bassett is still in 8th grade, although he has won a world title in cadets. He has competed at high levels before. I can see the argument, right? But what that puts in a kind of peculiar situation is Nathan Desmond from Becca, because these guys have gone back and forth. And I know their history pretty extensively. They actually wrestled in the Super 32 finals in middle school division with Bo Bassett winning in overtime. Of course, if you saw True Power in 2020, that was a match that Bo Bassett won. I think it was like 13-7 was the final score or something like that. It was a wild match. Desmond had him on his back. They were kind of back and forth. But Bo was able to outlast him in that go. But really, I think Nathan Desmond is the one that people are not quite talking enough about. It is all Bo, but I think Desmond's going to be, I think he's going to bring it. And you just look at the seeds, and I think that's that shows with him being the second seed here. Cooper Hilton, who is actually from Tennessee, but he goes to school at Wyoming Seminary. He's the number 3 seed. So you got 3 guys from Pennsylvania schools, 2 guys from Pennsylvania that are going to be wrestling for a Super 32 belt. And then let's not forget state champ Louis Gill from Hickory. Louis Gill's a guy who had an untraditional route to a state title last year in AA, and ends up winning a state title. He is now back down to 106. So kind of like you said, 1 day weigh-in Friday night. Okay, you get to weigh in, then all of a sudden you're rejuvenated, you're ready to go. Louis Gill, I think he's probably as tall as most 45-pounders, but he is still a 106-pounder. So he's another one coming in at the 6th seed now. Looking forward to seeing what he's able to do, especially with guys like Bo and Nathan Desmond there.
And I know he wasn't 100% healthy for last postseason, and he wasn't as strong as he wanted to be last postseason, and he's still a state champion. He grinded through that unconventional postseason calendar, which was just, as you look back on it, just an unbelievable ride to go through the super regional round and have to keep bringing your A game just in order to make it to the next round. You've seen some crazy things happen, and so Louis Gill kind of fought and survived, and then he saved his best wrestling for last. And you mentioned it. You can't forget about him. I think when it comes to size and strength and the experience that he has, I wouldn't call him a bracket buster by any means, but you can't overlook what this kid can do. And I guess if he's going to be the 6 and Bo's going to be the 1 and Desmond's going to be the 2, he'll end up on the top half. He'll end up in Bo's side of the bracket, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that'll be, and this weight in general, I think, just looking at the seeding, is a powerhouse weight. No matter what comes and goes with Knox and with Barrick Jordan moving up, it's a powerhouse weight in general, but also from a Pennsylvania perspective. And you can run down through all the other kids from PA who have seeds, but there's a bunch of them. So this is going to be a highly representative weight class for the Keystone State.
I mean, and it usually is. We normally see a lot of Pennsylvania wrestlers competing at 106 and the lower weights here. And, just thinking back to all the guys that have competed at 106 in the Super 32, it goes back quite a ways. But you had mentioned it, man. There's so many guys here. 9 guys seated in the top 32. Bo being 1, Desmond 2. Mutarelli, and Anthony Mutarelli is a guy who we got to see at True Power this year. He wrestled he wrestled Shane McFillin of Becca, so I think he's going to be one that's in the mix as well. You look at guys like from your backyard, Aaron Seidel from Northern Lebanon. I think he's a guy who has potential to be a guy like Louis Gill, who was last year, where he was not necessarily undersized, but kind of took some lumps. He took some losses at Powerade, but was able to come through when it counted in the postseason. I think he's one to keep an eye on here at the Super 32. Same with Luke Soriani from Abington Heights. He was a state medalist last year. He was 6th at 106. He had a great summer this year. Placed at the Journeyman tournament, which is obviously a very tough outing. He beat Seidel from Northern Lebanon there. So, I'm looking forward to some of these young guys that haven't really had a chance to go against, head-to-head some of these bigger name guys. So it's going to be interesting to see where some of these young guys are able to fall.
And by the way, I talked to Seidel yesterday just about Super 32, and I'm really impressed by him as a kid and the way that he chases losses. Like in wrestling, that's what the best kids do. They chase opportunities to lose and do what they can to win. So Aaron Seidel has put himself, to his credit, in position to lose matches. The other thing I've also learned is that most of the kids from the eastern half of the state, most of the seeded Pennsylvania kids from the eastern part of the state, have spent at least a little bit of time working out together this week. That was what Aaron Seidel said. So you have, it was Seidel and I think Mutarelli and Davis Mutika and Tahir Parkins from Nazareth. All those guys had gotten together, I think, at Wyoming Sem to work out and really try to bring it in full force.
Yeah, well, that's that's a dangerous combination when you put all those guys in there together. I'm just going through the seeds that Willie updated, and it appears that Anthony Mutarelli is not in the seeds right now. So he was at one time. He was the 13. So it looks like Sirianni is 14. Seidel is 15. And then Aaron Cement from Council Rock North, he is the 18th. He's a guy who not a lot of people are going to know because he's coming over from Jersey, but he's now at Council Rock North. He's a guy who I know a lot of people have mentioned him to me as, hey, you better watch out for this kid. He's really tough. He's the 18th. Motika, as you mentioned, he's the 19th. And then Tahir Parkins is 27. McFillin is 28. So, there are some changes from what we saw before with the seeds. Anthony Mutarelli not being in that. Of course, we mentioned how he had a win over McFillin at True Power. But there's a lot of unseeded guys here that I'm looking forward to. Nico Fanella from Indiana area. He was a Keystone State junior high champion this past year. He was on our team at the National Freestyle Duels that we took out to Jersey. And I got to talk to him and his dad, and I'm really impressed with the way he's wrestled throughout the year. And Liam Flanagan from Central Dauphin, a guy who we saw last year, make a solid run through the postseason. And then Kai Sheptick from Waynesburg, I saw him at like 125, 130 at one point, and he's down to 106 for the Super 32. So, again, you mentioned it, guys dropping down to wrestle these smaller weights. If he can get back up and rejuvenate and rehydrate, I think he's going to be a problem for a lot of wrestlers.
And just my 2 cents here, 3 Bethlehem Catholic kids checking in at 106. They're going to have some things to sort out and maybe some good problems to solve for Jeff Karam with that young group of guys coming through, led by those lightweights, including Nathan Desmond there. So interesting dynamic. I'm pretty sure, by the way, that Aaron Seidel said that there was one other kid working out at Wyoming Sam. It was Sebastian De Janeiro, who's a 22 seed from Florida, just for what that's worth. So you had a nice crew, and obviously trying to get the best partners you can get in advance of this beast is huge.
It really is. But the story here is Bo Bassett, right? And what's going on with the seedings, what's going on with the what is going on with all the jumping around. It's going to be interesting to see how the chips end up stacking and where they end up, because it has pretty big implications. As I said, Bo went from the second to the first, but if Knox comes down, it's like, okay, where do you put him? He was a Fargo cadet national champion. I don't know. I think you can make an argument for any one of those two to be the top seed at 106 should that happen. But we'll find out soon enough, Dustin. If you go to 113, this is where Vinny Kilkeary of Greater Latrobe, a guy who was a state champion as a freshman. Of course, he had that miracle run in the state championships to win a state title, beating Tyler Kasak, but also Jacob Van D in the state finals. Last year, he settles for third after losing to Zach Jackaruso. Van D ended up winning that weight class, but he is here as the top seed, and there's, for good reason. He won the Super 32 last year at 106 pounds, so now up to 113 for the Super 32 this year. Vinny had a loss to Dalton Perry at True Power. A couple weeks later, he goes down to Myrtle Beach, where the Super 32 was held last year, and wins a belt. Obviously not the year that he wanted, to finish in the third position, but he's still the number one seed coming in here. Barrick Jordan coming up from 106 is the second seed. Anthony Knox from Jersey is the third. Cole Hunt from Georgia is the fourth. Vinny's gonna have he's gonna have his hands full. I can just tell you that right now. Maybe not Pennsylvania wrestlers, but there's a lot of nationally ranked guys here that are going to be looking to take him down.
And he is the man to beat. Keeps that top seed with Barrick Jordan coming up. You talk about the results, not a roller coaster ride per se, but as you mentioned, the loss of True Power. Then he goes on a run at Super 32, moves up to 13 to try to get back at the top of the state podium. and runs into just a couple problems in the super regional round where he lost to Camden Williams. That was 9-7 at Altoona. And you talk about two completely different body types, two different ends of the spectrum at the 113 weight class. Kilkiri on the short, powerful side. Camden Williams, so long and such a good thrower, so good in these leverage situations. That ultimately is what won him the match against Vinny at Super Regionals. And then at States, he runs into Jack Russo from Delaware Valley, who had just a really good run at the state tournament, was able to kind of slow him down and gum up his offense. And I suspect you're going to have some kids trying to do the same thing with him. Now, watching that and executing on that are two different things. To have that game plan, he's the kind of kid, even with that compact stature of his, is able to dictate the tone of matches. And such a good combination of power and quickness and technique. And that's going to be a tough combination for anybody. You look at maybe some of these mismatched situations. If you have a couple longer 13-pounders, it's going to be a real test for him to try to go through this bracket at 113. But I think what he learned last year was how to deal with guys who have different body types and different styles than him.
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned, I mean, he has such a high pace, right? And you go back and watch that match with Jack Russo. You know, Jack Russo scored the only takedown of the match, and everyone was saying, well, you should hit him for stalling. And he was just, I mean, Vinny was just pushing him around the mat, right? So you're right, and I think that's a style matchup. And you look at the match from Super Regionals with Caden Williams. I mean, he was just, I don't think he was prepared for that type of style match, right? And the thing about Vinny is he corrects those things, right? I mean, every week he's gotten better and better. So I would not be surprised to see him, you know, continue to improve and do that here at the Super 32. But he's not the only one from Pennsylvania. He just happens to be the top seed. Jax Forest from Bishop McCourt. Now, again, not a lot of people are going to know the name because he's not from Pennsylvania originally. He was from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, has moved up to Johnstown to wrestle for Bishop McCourt. Him and Vinny Kilkiri have gone back and forth. I don't think he's ever beaten Kilkiri, but Kilkiri's beat him in Fargo, and he also beat him at the Northeast Regionals in freestyle. Jax Forest is kind of a guy that a lot of people are looking to do big things on the high school level. And then Gage Botero from Faith Christian Academy, a guy we got to see at True Power. He wrestled Jack Consiglio. He comes in as the 10th seed out of Faith Christian. So, you know, right off the bat, we've got a lot of talent. Botero was a Fargo All-American this past year. And then, of course, you have Sam Herring as well, who's the 15th seed. He is, you know, again, like Bo Bassett, only an 8th grader, but has already accomplished a lot. He's, you know, was a second place finisher at the Fargo Nationals in the U16 division. He won at True Power, beating Cale Nasdio from Williamsport. So, you know, the kid's he's got talent, right? He's got talent. And, you know, you got two Bishop McCourt guys both seated in the top 15 here. You know, you had mentioned Bethlehem Catholic with all those 106s. Here you got a couple of Bishop McCourt guys all kind of lumped together.
And you've also got 4, by my count, state medalists who are not seeded in this tournament, who are capable of doing some funky things. Like Tyler Chappell, you're going to have to beat Tyler Chappell. You're going to have to beat, you know, Gage Botero didn't quite get over the top. I would have loved to have seen him and Consiglio maybe wrestle another minute, because Botero was right there with him and, you know, was able to kind of funk out of it. He wanted to get funky where Consiglio, that wasn't his style. And I think one precision shot from Consiglio early was enough in that matchup. But that formula, you know, he's going to make it really difficult, even for these high level guys, to finish on him. And Cale Nasdio, I mean, what can you say about this kid? Just kind of keeps his nose to the grindstone, and here he comes in as the very last seed. He's got a number next to his name, but he got that 32 seed. I'm interested to see if maybe he can spring an upset or two along the way too.
Oh, I definitely think he could. You know, you look at how deep 113 is for Pennsylvania. I mean, we haven't even mentioned, you know, Carson Wagner from Northampton area. You know, Cale Nasdio, as you mentioned, you know, he had that close loss to Sam Herring, but let's not forget, I mean, he was in the state finals last year. I think he's a guy who's going to come out looking to score points and get on the podium here in Greensboro. But also, you look at all the unseeded wrestlers that I think are really going to push some of these bigger name guys. You had mentioned him, Tyler Chappell. Chappell has a win over Carson Wagner. Not saying I'm surprised that he's not in the seeds, but I am a little bit to say, Tyler Chappell shouldn't be in the top, 32. I would say, you're missing out on him being there, because I think he probably deserves it, just based on his records throughout Scholastic and freestyle. You look at other guys, Landon Baney from West Branch, state medalist. He was 6th last year. In addition to wrestling on in the state tournament, he then went on to wrestle in freestyle for us at the Wranglemania team in Pennsylvania. And I was really impressed with his pace and how he was able to do some in-match adjustments. Hunter Robeson from Sagertown, another guy who's, he's a senior now, and he's kind of bounced around. He was a guy who was looking to be a state champion this past year at 106, but just didn't pan out that way. He ends up and settles for a fifth place finish in Hershey. So these are guys that are going to come battle. These are guys that are not going to go easily away. And you look at all the young guys: Jax Forest, Gage Botero, Sam Herring. These guys are all guys that have never wrestled one high school match in their careers. And then you have guys like Hunter Robeson, who's wrestled in Powerade, wrestled in, the state tournament. Carson Wagner's wrestled in every single tournament known to man. Tyler Chappell, So if I'm one of those guys, I got a chip on my shoulder, because who are you to see these young guys over me? Like, when I've already wrestled some of these bigger name tournaments.
And if you're a kid who has worn a state medal around your neck, you are familiar with the idea of having to grind through these difficult tournament situations where maybe you're not at your best, or it's a low scoring, it's a odd matchup for you. You're not feeling your best. You're sick. You're banged up. Whatever. In order to get to that state medal, you have to have a certain set of qualities that will translate pretty well to an event like this too. Now, obviously, high level wrestling from start to finish. So there will be challenges down there that some of these guys haven't seen, but in my opinion, if you have a Pennsylvania state medal, you have what it takes to surprise some people down there, whether you're seated or not.
Yeah, and you just look at the number of wrestlers that we haven't even talked about that are here. Stephen Harris from Conwell-Egan, he was an 8th place finisher last year. Logan Sallet, Parker Senapal from Burgettstown. I'm excited to see Jason Torres from Malvern Prep. He's a young freshman who I think is going to do well in his high school career. So, overall, I would say, Kilkiri is in the hunt, right? Jax Forest is a podium. He's kind of a fringe guy there, being the 7th seed. And Gage Botero, Sam Herring are going to have to wrestle pretty tough to get onto the podium. But, I'm really watching Carson Wagner, Cale Nasdio, and Tyler Chappell, Hunter Robeson. Those are the guys. I mean, not saying that it doesn't matter what happens with the other guys, but these are the ones that I want to see where you're at, right? Because we've seen Sam, we've seen Gage, Journeyman, Fargo, all these different major events. I want to see how these other guys are performing and seeing where they're at, and especially getting older, right? Sometimes you just I'm going to take the summer off. I'm not going to wrestle. When you're younger, it's a lot different, right? You're hungry. You want to keep on going, and Pennsylvania has a lot of young guys here at 113. Speaking of young guys, Dustin, if you go up to 120. And I said this in my preview of 120, is it's not every day that you have a guy who has never wrestled a high school match seated over a guy that was a state champion in Pennsylvania, right? But that's what we have here at 120 pounds, where Maddox Shaw is the number 10 seed. So Maddox Shaw is a guy who was PJW state champion. He was a Keystone State champion. He was a Fargo All-American this past year, which really is why he's in the national rankings, because of the quality wins he's had. Him and Dalton Perry have gone back and forth. I think they wrestled 3 times in 1 year. And but Jaden Pepe from Wyoming area is sitting at the number 20 seed. He only had 1 loss last year, and he was a state champion. The year before that, he was 3rd in the state. And he's rewarded with a number 20 seed. So it's like, my gosh, what's going on there? And I don't know. I'm excited to see Dalton Perry, and I'm excited to see Maddox Shaw and where they are with regards to some of these bigger guys. Nate Jesaruga is a top seed. He's one of the best in the nation. So, but where does that leave Jaden Pepe? I want to see where he's going to end up.
And maybe, I don't know if he's a kid who's fueled by disrespect or is concerned about seedings, but to be a state champion in Pennsylvania and to be a number 20 seed, at the very least, is kind of a sobering reminder for all of us of just how deep and how good this tournament is. As you mentioned, they're all taking aim at a pretty prohibitive favorite in this one, in Nate Jesaruga, who I think is 4th in Willie's pound for pound rankings. But this is a good group of PA kids. And then I know you mentioned it in the preview that you did for PA Power, but Gavin Bradley, unseeded down there, tough, physical, high pace. I mean, I don't think anybody in this bracket is all that interested in seeing an experienced kid like this early on. Hayden Cunningham, I think there'd probably be a number next to his name if he were healthy last year from State College. Cohen Bainey from Bald Eagle area as a 4th place medalist. There's Mason Ziegler, a 7th placer last year as a freshman, I believe. He looked pretty good against Carl Schindeldecker at True Power a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he definitely did, and he was a late, kind of fill in there. So for him to take that match late and still end up, being in that match and wrestling Carl pretty tough. And this is why I love doing shows live, because I get text messages and DMs during the show, and I can see what's going on. Jaden Pepe is not listed in Willie's updated seeds, so I don't see him in there. And I'm also hearing potential rumors that Maddox Shaw may not be at the Super 32. So those are things just to keep an eye on. And again, when we do that, and I think I told you this yesterday when we talked about doing the show, is I can't tell you how many years I've done a preview and done a show, and I'm like, this is it. We got all the guys here, and next thing you know, half of them aren't there, or the big, some of the big name guys are just they're not there for whatever reason. It's hard to do a preview. It's not like the state tournament where unless you're missing weight, you're showing up, right? So I get it, but that's not confirmed at this point. But Jaden is not in the seeds that Willie updated. Mason Leapart, I don't know. Did you mention him, Dustin, at all? I mean, this is a guy who was, very, very close to beating Mac Church last year in the state tournament. I mean, there's a lot of people from District 3 that are saying he should have beat Mac Church. They missed some back points, and Mason finished 3rd in the state last year. In his 3rd trip to the state tournament. He's committed to F&M. He's the number 19 seed. I love me some Mason Leapart, man. I've watched him wrestle for a long time. I've been on the receiving end of some harsh criticism for overlooking him over the years, and I'm not going to do that anymore. He's a guy that I think is going to compete with some of these bigger name guys, and same with Troy Homan from Penn Trafford, a guy who's really jumped the levels in his career over the years, training with Vinny Kilcarry, but having to wrestle him a whole bunch. In fact, they wrestled in the 3rd and 4th place match in Hershey last year. He's committed to NC State, so you got 2 Division I recruits there in the top 30 seeds here at the Super 32.
And I've seen Leapart enough to know that he's on a pretty short list of guys who can turn your offense into his scoring. His ability to get you to depths that you don't want to go as a wrestler, what looks like a good opportunity on Mason Leapart isn't usually a good opportunity at all. 2 years ago, and it was good to see him get on the state podium last year. I thought he was better than his finish the year before. He went, I think he went 2 and out as a sophomore the year before, and was clearly much better than what he showed there. Maybe after he lost early, it was just tough for him to come back. But that was the year where he beat Aiden Lewis at the district tournament, and that was, I believe, a quarterfinal matchup. So he beat Aiden Lewis largely on what I said. He funked his way to, I think, a 4-point move where he turned one of Aiden Lewis's a pretty quality shot into a 4-point move for himself and won that way. Lewis came back, and the next week or 2 weeks later was in the state finals. So Leapart, I wouldn't pay too much attention to the fact that he's only got one state medal to his credit. He's a guy, just like I said with Gavin Bradley, I don't think anybody really wants to run into that style either. And he has a way of kind of making that style shine almost no matter who he wrestles. Now, there's a bunch of outstanding kids there and, guys who are prepared to be able to finish shots under those circumstances, but he's way too funky to really be looking forward to wrestling him down there.
I remember that match from Spring Grove High School very, very well. And you're right, it was the quarterfinals. And, Lewis, like you said, comes back and is a state runner-up. And Mason just like kind of fizzled out there at the state tournament. So you're thinking, man, like this is a guy who beat the state runner-up. That was a wacky year at that weight, I thought. But in saying that, Mason is a guy he's a veteran, right? He's been in the trenches. He's had a lot of big matches, and like I said, he was very close to beating Mac Church last year in the state tournament. So I would not be surprised to see him knock off some of these other names that are up there in the seeds. And there's quite a bit of other Pennsylvania wrestlers that we haven't even mentioned. Like you said, Gavin Bradley. Probably one of the most impressive performances at True Power. And I know the guy, he was supposed to wrestle Dalton Perry. Verrett is a younger wrestler, but Bradley just came out firing on all cylinders, man. I mean, he was just, he was hammering it. I'm pretty sure he could wrestle a 20-minute match and not get winded. So that's going to pay dividends down here at Super 32 when you're wrestling 4, 5, 6 matches, pretty, close to back. So I'm excited to see Gavin because I think he's probably going to wrestle well. You had mentioned him, Hayden Cunningham. If he had not been injured last year, this may be a different conversation, but he was banged up last year for State College, unable to wrestle. I think he is in the mix. I don't know if he's quite back to full strength yet. Mason Ziegler, another one, like you said, wrestled tough at True Power. Could he, win a few matches? And here's the thing. The Super 32 and Pennsylvania, you ever hear that saying is your eyes are bigger than your stomach? Your grandmother say that to you, and you put so much on your plate and you're like, I can't finish this. Pennsylvania wrestlers do that a lot with Super 32. They come down there and like, man, I'm ranked number 2 in the state, or I'm a state medalist. I'm going to go down there, and a lot of them go 1 and 2. A lot of them go 2 and 2 because there's just, these brackets are insanely deep. And that's not a knock on us as Pennsylvania wrestlers, but it's just, I know there's an aura around us, but when you go to Super 32, this ain't a joke. Like you're going to get a guy who is really, really tough in the round of 264. Just look at the list to get into it. You're not wrestling. There's no real easy matches at the Super 32. And that's why it's so impressive for those who end up placing here.
Yeah, and I think Vinny Kokiri said it, I'm pretty sure. Just the emphasis in any tournament on trying to stay in the moment that you're in and not allow yourself to get swept up by what the brackets look like, how many matches you have to win to get to X, Y, or Z. At any tournament, that's kind of fruitless behavior. Let's put it that way. It's not going to get you anywhere good if you're not paying attention to the moment that you're in. And it's especially true at Super 32, where if you allow yourself to look at the big picture and look how daunting it is and try to assess probabilities of you making it through that, you're already on your heels a bit, I think, for the actual wrestling. So it just kind of comes down to all the tournament cliches about surviving and advancing and trying to stay on a even keel mentally and emotionally. If you're going to suffer that loss, then it's really important if you lose early to not let yourself get too far ahead and think too much about how many matches you have to win. It's not going to work at a tournament like this. You really have to stay engaged and try to, and for that, I mean, it's a really awesome test at this time of year to see where you're at when it comes to your mental fortitude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just looking at the field, you're right. You have to be prepared for this. This isn't just one of those warm-up tournaments where you're going to see how your condition is and how you've been wrestling. I mean, like you said, this is something that it tests your fortitude. I like that. I may steal that. 126, it thins out a little bit. We're kind of, a little bit privileged at 106 through 120. 26, it drops off a little bit for us. But Nick O'Neill is a guy who had a great journeyman tournament. He won the journeyman hammer last year. He had a great year despite finishing fourth in national preps. He only had a handful of losses, one of them to be Mason Gibson. He finished third at the Powerade tournament. A sophomore, really a huge name coming up through the ranks. And his younger brother, Matt, is really another big name coming up through the Malvern program. Nick O'Neill sits at the number 14 spot. The one who I'm really excited to see is Colin Wrath. And I am biased because Colin was at True Power in 2020 as a cameraman, and he came back and wrestled in 2021 against Spencer Barnhart, a guy he had lost to a week or 2 weeks prior to that at the Journeyman, avenges that loss. So, Colin's a freshman now. Here's the thing about Colin is he wrestled in the Super 32 last year as an 8th grader and placed 8th at 113. That's really hard to do, right? I mean, Mason Gibson won it as an 8th grader. Ryan Kirkham won it as an 8th grader. Those are two guys that are two of the best in their class. Colin Rath placed as an 8th grader at 113 in a very deep weight class. I'm excited to see where he's at this year. We saw him at True Power beating Spencer Barnhart. Now he's the number 22 seed. Just really excited to see where he's at. Chris Vargo, who is the 28th seed here, he goes to Charleroi, wrestles for Bentworth in a co-op. Vargo had one of the weirdest roller coasters of a postseason last year. Really, really up and down. But it ended on the right note because he finished third in the state and finished ahead of all the wrestlers he lost to in the Super Region. So, last year was a weird year with the Super Region, but it was especially weird for Chris Vargo, who was winning and then losing, but ended up winning when it mattered and got the third place finish behind Jaden Pepe and Gavin Bradley. So two very quality wrestlers he finished third behind. So I think a lot of people are probably going to quote myself as sleep on, that's one of my favorite terms is, kids being slept on. I think a lot of people are going to overlook him, but that would be a mistake.
I don't think you have to say that you're quoting yourself. I don't think anybody's going to get on you about the attribution of your quote if you're quoting yourself.
They might. I've got a lot of haters out there, Dustin. A lot.
I know. You have a lot of friends. You got even more enemies. I'm familiar. To your point, Colin Rath. I wasn't familiar with his history with Barnhart before True Power, but when I'm watching those two wrestle, I got the feeling that Rath would win 6, maybe 7 out of the 10 times. And I could be wrong about that, but from start to finish in that one, he wrestled like a kid who was a senior and not a 2 months into his freshman year. That 8th place finish at Super 32 last year, I mean, that is confirmation that he has the goods to survive and keep punching his way through this thing. It's strange seeing a kid who hasn't wrestled a varsity match yet for Bethlehem Catholic be ranked ahead of Dante Frenzy, for example. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think there's 14 Frenzies in this tournament at various weight classes. And there's another 14 coming up through in the 6th and 7th grade. But I think Colin Rath, I'm really excited to see where he's at because, he looks like a kid who's pretty unflappable. He looks like he's got a lot of poise in addition to his technique and his strength and all that.
I like the fact that you pointed out that Frenzies, there's like a whole bunch of them, but also the Becca, contingent that's down here. They make up like half of the, between Bishop McCord and Bethlehem Catholic, that's like half the Pennsylvania field, right?
Yeah.
It is weird to see a guy like Frenzy not seated in the top 33. But you got to look at what Colin Rath has done at the Super 32 previously and, his experience at Journeyman and things like that. So, but let's not forget, Frenzy beat Carter Dybert, right? When he finished 5th in the state, he was 4th last year. Carter Dybert was 3rd at the Super 32 last year. Frenzy is a guy he's very tall, very lanky. So I don't know if he's filled out anymore being at 26, but he and his brother both are here. Marco's here as well. And as you mentioned, there's quite a few of them. I am very excited about 26 for a variety of reasons. One is we only got 3 in the top, 33 seeds, but look at all the other wrestlers that I think can make a run here. Ashton Campbell from Becca, I like him a lot. He was at Palisades his freshman year, now a junior. Vince Wozakis, do you have to say any more other than your Vince Wozakis, younger brother of Nick? He's really good. Kind of surprised that he's not in the seedings as well. And you look at guys further down, but Nick Jones from West Allegheny, very impressed with him last year as a freshman. Big name coming up through, wrestled with the Gladiators. Very impressed with his performances until he got injured last year. He was banged up a little bit. Gunnar Myers from Wallenpaupack, he was a guy who really jumped out and finished 5th in the state as a freshman, coming out of a school that really doesn't get a whole lot of recognition and is not known for wrestling. I thought he had a great super regional and then a state tournament that he finished very high at in Hershey, considering where he came from. Xander Fatoris from Waynesburg, he's also in the weight class, as is Joe Simone from Waynesburg, a guy who I was pretty high on last year. He was a Powerade runner-up, lost to Vinny Kilkeary. And then Blake Reiner from Trinity, another young guy. Charlie Robeson from Conwell-Egan. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on. So again, we have the quote big names. I wouldn't even call Nick O'Neill a big name, but these are the guys that are seeded. So where is Pennsylvania going to end up when it and a lot of these guys are going to meet head to head too, which is really great for someone like myself who does rankings. It's nice to have those head to head results
in an environment like this. And from a Pennsylvania perspective, this weight class looks very, very ripe for an unseeded PA kid to get onto that podium somehow, because there are some guys, they're just a prove it situation away from being better recognized, like Xander Fatoros, for example. A few of these guys, they have prove it opportunities and can really kind of change the whole narrative about where they are, some of these young wrestlers and stuff. But I'm definitely more intrigued. No disrespect to the kids who are seeded from Pennsylvania in this class, but I'm very intrigued by the guys who aren't seeded from PA in this class. There's a bunch of really, really good ones that have a shot to do something special here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Super 32 is where you make your money, right? That's where people end up, getting offers. They're the ones that, get the looks from the college wrestlers. So somebody's gonna do it, right? I mean, you're gonna see somebody who's turning it up and ends up, getting noticed where they normally wouldn't be. So I mean, that's the reason why people go to Super 32. It's one of the tournaments of the year where there's just so many college coaches. Especially before the season. So it's obviously a big draw for them. If we go up to 132, we have Nick Bazakis from Wyman Seminary. Yes, I know he's from Florida originally, but he was wrestled at 7 for the last few years now. He's wrestles for Team Pennsylvania. He wrestled there for Fargo. He is a 2-time Super 32 belt winner already, going for his 3rd. And then you got Mac Church from Waynesburg, who was a state champion last year. Last year was Super 32 medals, finishing 4th at 120. Again, you look at the trajectory that he had as a freshman, beats Kilkeary in the regional finals, then ends up in 3rd place in Hershey. Kilkeary 1st, Van D 2nd. So the thing I'm excited about is, one, he got his commitment out of the way. So he's no longer worried about, impressing the college coaches. That's one. Two is he's up for me, a significant weight. I mean, I know it's only 32, but he went from 106 to 120 to 132. I'm curious to see where his body is and what he is going to be able to do wrestling stronger, bigger, older opponents.
I think along those lines, I mean, what he did last year at 120 pounds was a bigger question mark to me, making the jump from 106 than jumping to 132 from 120. I thought he looked really good at 120 pounds, and I suspect he's going to look pretty good and pretty strong at 132 as well. Challenging situation just with Buzakis there, and the list of names who have won multiple Super 32s is an extremely short list. And, Vinny Kilkeary is trying to get his name on that list. I don't know how many have done it twice. I don't know how many have done it 3 times, but that is not a very common thing either as I look through the results before. And to your point earlier, when you were kind of wrapping up 126, I mean, this tournament, there's some exceptions, and it's not an end-all, be-all. If you get on the podium, it's not a guarantee you're going to be a good college wrestler. If you don't get on the podium, it doesn't mean you're not going to get your shot at the next level. But it is a pretty good indicator of whether you can or can't really thrive at the next level. If you look down the list of names of guys who have won this thing, doing that and winning this tournament or finishing high on the podium, it really speaks well to your ability to wrestle top competition and to do it in just a chaos filled atmosphere, having to wrestle a bunch of matches to do it.
Right, with like 25 mats, it's really insane. Try covering it, Dustin. It's not fun from a media perspective either. You're absolutely right though. It's not a automatic you're going to be good in college, but it's also not, hey, you didn't place, that doesn't mean you're not going to have a good career, right? Some other names here at 132, and I just looked at Willie's updated seeds. Mac Church is now the 12. Buzakis is still the 1. Spencer Barnhart will be the next one to check in. He's at 18, so they bumped up 2. And then Colton Stone King is the 24. So Stone King is in the same bracket as his teammate Mac Church. Stone King, he was also on our national freestyle duels team. I thought he wrestled really well out there in Jersey. Stone King was 5th in the state last year. It was his first state medal. Spencer Barnhart, national prep champion, really has come on pretty strong, and he's now at 32. We talked about him and Colin Wrath. Other than that, it's thinned out from Pennsylvania standpoint. Ethan Kolb from Benton area, he was 7th in the state last year. He's now up to 132. A guy I'm looking forward to seeing is Owen Reinsel from Brookville. He's had last year he battled Mason Gibson like 3 times, maybe 4. And he's committed to Lehigh, so he's going to be joining his former teammate Nathan Taylor of Brookville at Lehigh. 2-time state medalist, 2-time finishing 4th in the state. He's unseeded, so looking forward to seeing how he ends up here at the Super 32.
Yeah, and let's see what that means. Let's see how much that matters, that experience. I mean, certainly if you're going to go head-to-head with Mason Gibson a bunch of times, you're going to have some kind of feel for what it's like to have to beat a kid like that in the Super 32. So more power to him. I want to see what happens there with Ethan Kolb. I think he was in a situation, I think, with another cluster of guys who, the difference between finishing 7th at that weight class last year and finishing 2nd or 3rd wasn't all that much. So I don't put a lot of stock in that 7th place. I think it could have just as easily been higher.
Let's go up to 138 pounds. Speaking of jumping up weights, Tyler Kasak from Becca. He was a state champion last year, beating Carter Diber in the state finals, 5th in that wild 106-pound bracket, which, by the way, you look at all the state champions in 2021 that were in the state bracket or at 106, Vinny Kilkeary, Jacob Van D, Briar Priest didn't make it to the state tournament. Mac Church and Tyler Kasak, all of them state champions, and all were in that one bracket or in that one weight class in 2020. He is the number 3 seed, is Kasak. A guy who I'm very familiar with, and that's Matt Repos. He checks in at the number 14 seed. Didn't have a great Hershey tournament last year. I was disappointed with how he finished up. I thought he took some losses he shouldn't have. He was 4th in the state as a freshman, beat Mac Church on that caution call, comes back and finishes in 4th. But last year he was 7th. I thought he would finish higher, but he had a good journeyman tournament, knocked off a few nationally ranked guys. So that's why he is in there in the top 15 in the seedings. And going down through Dom Findora from Downingtown West, very impressed with him at True Power. Probably 1 or 2, maybe 3 of the most impressive performances at True Power for me. Dom Findora beating Scott Johnson. Findora looked just really, really sharp. Really, he looked like he was in season. That's the type of wrestling you saw out of him. He is the number 24 seed. He's committed to Drexel, so he's pretty solid. Luke Simcox from Central Mountain. He and Dalton Perry have kind of come up through together. They both have very good results in the junior high ranks. Simcox last year was a state medalist, finished his 5th in the state last year. He wrestled Briar Priest at True Power. And, he was coming up in weight a little bit, and he battled him tough. I mean, he almost took out the state champ, and, I was really impressed with how he wrestled, and excited to see him. We had him on our Wrangle Mania team up in New York at the Journeyman event, so, I got to know him a little bit, and, he's going to bring it.
Just Luke Simcox, the first time I saw him was at Super Regionals, which was a wild 126-pound bracket last year.
Yeah.
He beat Ethan Bergink, the state champ from Hempfield area, early in that tournament and kind of announced his presence, I thought, and was really big for 126. On the other side of that, Matt Repos was, he looked a little on the small side for 126. So I'm really eager to see Matt Repos making that jump from 26 to 38. Your former coach, Jeff Swagger, those guys really, last year in particular with all the weirdness, really subscribed to the idea of let's make sure our wrestlers are comfortable and are capable of going 6 minutes. And so when push came to shove, there were a few CD wrestlers last year, including Matt Repos, who, if they were on the fence between, let's say, 120 and 126 in his case, they went 126 to try to feel better and have more energy and have more endurance. And I thought there were a couple times in the postseason where that hurt Repos a bit. Guys' size and strength, Simcox included, who beat him, at Super Regionals. And then I think, the situation with the state tournament, those being 8-man brackets, and the fact that once you walked into Giant Center, you knew you were walking out with a medal. I think that dynamic worked against Matt Repos a bit last year. You've seen him. I mean, he was right there with Tyler Kasak early in Hershey. He beat Mac Church on that caution call a couple years ago at 106, but those two guys were very evenly matched. They wrestled last year at the PIAA team championships, and that was another really tight match that Mac Church won late. Deserving winner without a doubt. But Matt Repos is right there with Kasak. He's right there with Mac Church. I can imagine, without having caught up with Matt or the CD coaching staff since really the end of last season, that if he's 138 pounds, I suspect that he took the lessons from last year, applied them, and you'll see him filling out that weight class a little bit better than he did last year.
Well, I mean, I would expect that as well, because his results at the Journeyman would indicate that. 38 is an interesting weight here at the Super 32 for Pennsylvania, because look at all the unseeded guys that are just really tough. Connor Pierce is one guy that jumps off the page at me. We saw him at True Power. He lost to Connor Hare. He's a 3-time state medalist, 7th twice, 4th last year. Chad Ozias from Connellsville, he was 8th in the state last year. Connor Saylor from Hickory, the Gills aren't the only boys from Hickory that can wrestle. Connor Saylor is a guy who is really, really tough. But then guys that haven't been on the podium quite yet, but are very capable of it. Brayden Bauer from Williamsport, him and his twin brother Riley, I've been really high on since they came into high school at Williamsport. Lucas Capusta from Hempfield had a great year last year after, I wouldn't say a disappointing freshman year, but he took his lumps, right? And this past year, he really, I think, took it up a level. Nathan Stone from Franklin Regional, kind of a middle-of-the-road guy that just keeps on banging his head, and trying to get better and getting better, and I think that's paid off for him. Ty Waters from West Allegheny, very interested to see Ty. I've been pretty high on him coming up through the ranks. He was injured last year, had some quality wins, including some wins at the Powerade tournament before suffering a season-ending injury. So another guy that I'm really looking forward to. And then there's a couple freshmen that I'd like to see. Luke Sipes from Altoona, guy who I'm pretty familiar with, who's come through the ranks. He's a name that, Luke Simcox and Luke Sipes, you kind of always saw those two Lukes coming up through the PJW ranks. And Colin Gage from Quakertown, another very, very tough freshman coming up through. So, Quakertowns, they've always had tough wrestlers, but, I think Colin's going to be really good for them. So 38, there's more guys to talk about, I think, in the unseeded area than there are the seeded wrestlers, because there's just so many possibilities and so many tough guys here that just aren't in the top 33.
And again, I mean, I could probably say the same thing in each weight class, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around a 3-time Pennsylvania state medalist being a pretty hefty underdog. And that's what the Super 32 brings to the table, man. I mean, there are some absolute hammers all over the place, but it's a good opportunity for a guy like Connor Pierce to prove it, to get out there and get it done and prove that he was underrated.
145, this guy's not going to be overlooked, and that is Jackson Arrington from Forest Hills. And my gosh, he was third in the state as a sophomore after winning a state title. He was first in the state last year, winning a dominating performance, at 132 pounds, won the Powerade tournament, goes out to Fargo, finishes fourth and had some really good wins there. But he was fifth at the Super 32 last year at 126. He goes to Flo's, who's number one, gets a win over Hunter Garvin. And I mean, he's one of the top guys in the nation now, right? I mean, he goes from finishing third behind Ryan Crookham and Levi Haynes, and now Jackson Arrington and Levi Haynes are both, arguably the top guys in their weight classes. He's going to have a very tough time with the field. I'm not saying he's going to walk through this. Cody Chittum from Tennessee, he used to be at Blair. He's from the Tennessee area. He's one of the best in the nation. He's going to have his hands full if those two do meet. I think you look at the other Pennsylvania wrestlers here, Jude Swisher, another one that I'm really looking forward to seeing him and his M2 teammate Pearson Manville from State College. They're both seated in the top 10. Swisher's a 6, Manville is the 7. And a guy who I'm very, very impressed with, and that's Dylan Evans from Chartiers Valley, a guy who was 8th as a freshman. Last year, he has a very good run through the postseason, ends up finishing 4th in the state. But what impressed me was him going out to Fargo and finishing 3rd in both freestyle and Greco. That is a lot of matches. I think he won like 20 total matches in Fargo between the two styles. It was just amazing. And he has a lot of college visits for a reason. A lot of guys want him on their team. He comes in at the number 9 seed. So, 145, and we haven't even scratched the surface with all the other names here. But right off the bat, Jackson Arrington, number 2 seed, Swisher as a 6th, and Pearson Manville as a 7th. I think that's good. That's a good barometer for Pennsylvania.
Boy, I think when you're describing Jackson Arrington finishing 3rd at the state tournament behind Levi and Crook, I mean, there's a scenario out there. I mean, it's improbable where you have 2 or 3 potential NCAA champs out of that one bracket at state.
True.
I mean, so right now, I mean, at Super 32, this feels a little bit like Arrington getting out of that 3rd place finish and being, sort of in a prove-it position and trying to get over the top now, this time at Super 32 where it was states before. Definitely has the goods to do it. Good win for him at who's number 1 to kind of get himself in the right direction for this one. But there's a lot of depth in this weight class. There are 4 Pennsylvania kids in the top 8 or 9 seeds. I mean, this is something that could very well, we'll see some of these matchups probably in the postseason as well. Pearson Manville was one of the victims of, last year's weirdness, having lost in, was it the regional round and
Yep.
at the true second match got him.
Yep.
And that was a challenging situation for everybody to lose in the final at a place like that and still have to come back and wrestle again. It's just unconventional and just didn't work out for him and didn't even make it to super regionals or states. And now you see him as the 6th seed in this tournament. And talented kid, had an unbelievable run out at Fargo. So I like him. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the Manvilles, I think all of them, right? Folk style isn't at the top of any of their lists. And I think Pearson's in the same boat. What's he going to do in a tough folk style tournament like this? And then, just like the other weights, Eric Aldorfer was a really nice surprise last year from Faith Christian in the state tournament. From my backyard, Griffin Gonzalez isn't a big name. And I think he's still got some scratching and clawing to do to get there, but they love him at Lebanon, and they think he's got at least state medalist potential. I think that's probably happening for him this year. So a lot of really good kids coming from Pennsylvania. Cade Wernsberger from Meadowbrook Christian as well. If he's still listed at the in the I guess he's not in the seeds, but if he's still participating. So good weight class for Pennsylvania, good weight class overall, and I'm really curious to see, can Jackson Arrington get over the top here?
It's going to be that's a tall task, right? But I think he's proven that he's in the conversation. There's no doubt about that. You had mentioned a lot of names that I'm pretty high on. Gonzalez, Wernsberger, Kellen Laffey from Pine Richland is a guy who I think is really under the radar, and I don't think he's quite getting the looks that he probably should because he hasn't had a state medal to his name. Connor Hare from Montgomery. A little surprised that he's not in the top 33 here, but again, look at how deep it is. He had a win over Alderfer at the redemption duel that we did after states. We saw him wrestle Connor Pierce at True Power a few weeks ago. He got a win there. Connor's he's down to wrestle anybody, anytime, anywhere, any weight. It doesn't matter. And I love that about him because he's just a competitor. I could say, Connor, I need you to wrestle a bear next and then a crocodile after that. And okay, do I have to make weight? That's just how he is. He was 5th in the state last year. I'm excited to see where he is, especially against some of these other tough guys. Landon Muth from Becca, one of 2 Becca guys here in the weight class, but he was 8th in the state. Quietly, Becca's they're going to be one of the top teams in the state. Obviously, I know that's such a bold statement. Becca being a good wrestling team.
They're quietly going to be good. That is extra bold.
After you can shut your mouth right now, Dustin. Okay, you're not a regular on the show. I'll evict you right out of the show real quick. Okay. Waynesburg was the talk of the town for the last couple of years. I'm telling you, Becca though, they're rejuvenating, if you will.
I think even by Becca's standards is what you're getting at. Even
Correct.
By Becca's standards, and expectations, this is a group that could be really special. And I think Becca could be ranked number 1 in the state in AAA. We'll see. I don't know. That's your territory, not mine. Becca's B team would probably be a top 10 team in the state.
No,
that's the way it looks.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong in that sense. I definitely think that they would be depth. They have a lot of depth there, and kids want to be on that team, regardless of whether they get into the lineup or not. You see some kids that wait 2-3 years to get in the lineup, and all of a sudden they go on a run. Right? We've seen that with a variety of different wrestlers from Becca. If we go up to 152, Eric Gibson from Bishop McCourt. He is your number 3 seed. He was 7th in the Super 32 last year, but that was up at 160. So Eric is actually coming down to 52. I'm not saying I'm nervous to see how he is at 52. I know that's he's going to be coming down in weight, right? That's you never know how that cut's going to go. He's 3rd. Probably one of the biggest names to not have a state title. He beat 2 state champions last year. He beat AJ Corrado and Grant McKay last year, but was ineligible because of that transfer from Forest Hills to Bishop McCourt. 2-time state medalist. Michael Dugan, a guy who we saw him and Gibson go head-to-head at True Power, and Gibson kind of turned it on and ended up winning, I believe it was 13-5. And Dugan is a guy who comes in as a number 32 seed. He was 3rd last year as a sophomore. So, I think there is a gap there, but Michael Dugan is not that far off from, I think, a potential like top 12 finish here at the Super 32. But those are only 2 seeded wrestlers here from Pennsylvania. It's definitely thinning out as we get up to the bigger weights.
Oh yeah, that'll be a trend as we keep going. Now these 2 guys having wrestled, Gibson just looked next level. Michael Dugan has gone out and he's tried to find the best competition he can get. Eric Gibson, was so quick and so powerful and so technical. And I think, watching those 2 wrestle at True Power, he just looked like he has a little bit of an edge and a little bit of hunger that's driving him after everything that happened with him last year. And this will be a really good thing for him. For a guy, so he's the number 3 seed. I think Willie's got him at number 6 or so in his national rankings. But this is a kid who I think he needs to go out. He needs a tournament win in some way or another. You mentioned he hasn't gotten a tournament win at the state level, didn't get a chance last year. I believe he's going to get that next spring. But I would love to see him go out and get a big win in this tournament and really, truly announce his presence on the national stage. He's there. He's well recognized. But I still think it's, even though his results are good as a wrestler, it's still based on more potential than results so far.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I mean, he's a guy who, doesn't have that one title, to his name that you're like, man, like this he's here. To be honest with you, he's wrestled his best at the Surge. In my opinion, as a freshman, he had a loaded bracket. Ended up beating Kenny Kaiser, who they went back and forth that year. Really, he's just kind of. I don't know. I'm not saying he's underperformed because he has not. He's just been in some weird weights. He's had some weird things happen to him. The move, that whole stuff, that affects somebody, right? So I mean, I'm not saying it's affected his wrestling because clearly he turned it up against Michael Dugan. But I'm right there with you, Dustin. I think he is just poised for like a big breakout performance. Fargo, he was a double All-American, wrestled at 52 and 60. In freestyle and Greco-Roman. So he's right there, right? He's right there with the best of them. And it would be, I think it would be great for him to come away with a Super 32 belt here. That's for damn sure.
He's got the goods to do it too. I mean, from what I saw wrestling Michael Dugan a few weeks ago, he looks like he's primed to make a run. Michael Dugan, I don't know where Eric Gibson stands on the weight issue, but I'm about 95% sure we'll see Michael Dugan again at 152 in the high school season as well. Long kid. When he's at his best, he's really pushing the pace and he's really creating he's really using that length to his advantage. I think what you're going to see from him is to try to turn it on and try to finish and try to be a little bit more aggressive and attack oriented.
I'm hoping we get to see that a rematch at the Surge. Gibson's registered, Dugan has not yet, but I'm hoping after Super 32 he gets registered because I think that could be another good match between them and kind of see where they are in their development. A bunch of unseeded guys here that to take note. Alan Alexander from Pope John Paul II. He was 6th in the state last year in Dubway. He's unseeded, but he's there. Andrew Harmon from Becca, another one of those, Landon Muth type guys that finished 6th, 7th, 8th in the state for Becca. Harmon was 7th last year. I think he's going to be in the mix. Bodie Morgan from Trinity. He's a sophomore now. Last year as a freshman, had a good year, but I was very impressed with him throughout. He won the journeyman in the C bracket, which just means he was in the A was like the top ranked guys, and he was in the C one. But he wrestled well. He wrestled. I mean, it wasn't a pushover tournament. I mean, he wrestled tough guys there. And Caden Wagner from Lewisburg, who is a 5th place finisher last year, he's also in the weight class. So a number of guys here that I think are going to push the pace. Will be interesting to see if any of them are able to get over the hump and get on the podium. Gavin Priest is a guy who I'm looking forward to seeing as a freshman, same as Mark Gray from Kiski area. And keep an eye on Sean Taylor from West Allegheny. Those West Allegheny guys they train well and they're tough. So, but 52 overall, not nearly as deep as some of our other weights.
And I think just the further you climb up, the harder it is to find depth of competition, that elite level competition. So it's just a natural thing. These lower weights are just absolutely loaded. And then eventually as they work their way up through the varsity ranks, they start to disperse a little bit.
So 160, speaking of big-time guys, and his name is Levi Haynes, and I think we all know him by now. Levi, number 1 wrestler in the nation at 160. He's your top seed. He's a 3-time state finalist, was a state champion last year after finishing 2nd the last 2 years previously. He was a runner-up at the Super 32 at 138 pounds. So now up to 160, and he looks big at 160. We saw him at True Power, wrestled Tyler Lillard, and man, he turned it up. He turned it on. He's a cadet world team member. I mean, that's the type of wrestler we're talking about here, right? He is just really jumped levels, right? He really has, and I'm excited to see Levi in. We saw him at Flows, who's number 1, had a nice win there, but this is something different, right? Winning a belt at the Super 32 is kind of like completes the the Trinity Award for him, if you will. I mean, he's won a state title. He made a world team. Now he needs a Super 32 belt. So, and I think he's ready to do that. I mean, he's going to Penn State, right? I mean, you don't go to Penn State and not show up with a belt. I don't think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be surprised if he didn't, put it that way, especially after having reached the finals here last year. Again, like you said, making the jump from 138 to 160. His expectation at the next level is to continue growing and eventually maybe you could see him start his career at Penn State in the 165 range, but I don't think he expects to be there. I think he and they are looking at maybe 174, 184. So the growth of Levi Haynes is not over by any means. He looks jacked for 160, 22 pounds up from last year. And last year he made another jump up. So, I think Levi, constant growth from him. I think before he made the world team, let's just put that, before he won a state title as well, he was twice in the finals before he actually got over the top. I don't think he was in that elite category of college prospects. That list of guys that you can be pretty sure are winning an NCAA title. But now he has worked himself there. He's been just shy of that elite level. Now I think he's made that jump into that level. And I think if you could kind of carve out a prototype recruit for Cale Sanderson in Penn State, it would be Levi Haynes. It would be the guy who's driving 2 hours from Adams County to M2 so he can train there. Him and his dad, Ken, are making that drive 2 to 3 times a week so he can get that top level training. You talk about commitment, loving being there, loving the process of wrestling. That all of that is Levi Haynes. He doesn't really have any holes in his game. Pace setter, offensive, technique is fantastic. Can chain wrestle. I mean, I'm very impressed by Levi, obviously, and I think he looks really good at 162. No question for me, making the jump from 138 to 160.
Yeah, and I agree with you with the growing. I don't think we've seen the end of his growing spurt here for Levi. I think he's going to continue to get bigger as he gets into college. One guy who I'm really looking for,
Jeff, he's never going to stop improving either.
No,
just lastly,
right.
Like even if he weren't in that elite level now, which I do think he is, he's going to be a guy who's going to make a ton of progress, not only this year, but when he gets into that Penn State room.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, you look at like a guy like David Taylor. I mean, there's a reason why he goes to M2. I mean, DT's a guy who's continued to get better every single week, every single month, every single year. I mean, he's just improved. So Levi, I think, is kind of cut from that same cloth. Jared Kessler at the number 6 seed. I'm kind of surprised to see him here because I know he was dealing with some injuries. So I'm hoping this is accurate and that he is going to be there. He's the 6 seed. Another guy who just has been there and been so close, and kind of like Eric Gibson, where has really performed well at the Surge. He won a Surge title as a freshman, beating a whole slew of state medalists. 4th in the state the last 2 years. Tough weight classes. He almost beat Rocco Welsh. In fact, they were wrestling and they wrestled into overtime in the state tournament. I don't know if you remember that, Dustin, but Rocco kind of thought he lost. And then he realized, oh, no, I didn't. And he went back and ended up beating Kessler. Two guys that are very familiar with each other. And Dom Federici from Wyoming Seminary, he's the number 26 seed here at 160 pounds. He must have really put on some weight because he wrestled Jude Swisher at the Redemption Duel. And, man, he was big, but I didn't think he was 160 big. So he must have put on some weight here. Outside of that, it's a little bit smaller, and like we just talked about, it's going to thin out. Sam Beckett from Souderton, he's at the Hill School now, I believe, and I don't know if he switched back or not to Souderton, but he was a national prep 4th place finisher last year. Nick Nettleton from Exeter, I'm excited about him, and Travis Stipetich from North Allegheny. I think he can win a few matches, but really the talk here is Levi Haynes and hopefully Jared Kessler. I'm really hoping Jared's there. He's a Pitt recruit, so I'm thinking this year is going to be one of his years where he's really going to push for that state championship.
And just has been on the wrong side of the margin. The margin between winning and losing, like the match you described with Rocco Welsh, is super thin, and sometimes the better kid doesn't get through. Not saying he was better, but just a tough way to go out. And I think, again, another kid, I think that the results, the podium finishes don't tell the full story on how good he is and how good he can be.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think that's the reason why Pitt wanted him, because they see that potential for him. Speaking of Rocco Welsh, 170 is where Rocco Welsh is. Speaking about growing, my gosh, Rocco Welsh, I can remember him as a 113 pounder in 8th grade and 126, and all of a sudden now he's up to 170. Rocco is a guy who, like his teammate Mac Church, recently made a commitment. He's going to be going to Ohio State. So again, pressure's off. You already made your college commitment. He's the number 2 seed behind Matt Singleton from Georgia, and this should be a really fun weight class. The reason being is because I think Roone Lawrence, man, Thane, if it's anything like his brother Thane made his money at the Super 32. My gosh, he just, I can remember having kids ask me, where the heck is Frazier? Where is this at? Roone is a guy who won a state title as a freshman, was a Powerade runner-up, and you look at, Powerade champion. You look at all this trajectory that he's had throughout, this past year. He has really come onto his own, and man, I'd love to see him and Rocco bang heads here at 170 pounds. But then you throw in a guy like Nolan Lear, who's the number 14 seed. Obviously, a guy who's very impressive, 2-time state medalist, 3rd last year, 5th the year prior. And then, you even go down further down the list, Dom D'Agostino from Interboro, who we saw at True Power. He wrestled really well there, beating Jake Jones from Saucon Valley. He's the number 29 seed, finishing 6th in the state last year. So really, when you look at the numbers here, 4 guys that I think, Rocco and Roone are in kind of one tier, and then Nolan and Dominic, I think, could be in another one. And then you even throw in a guy like Carter Gill, who was a 2-time state medalist, older brother of Louis Gill, being up at 170. That's a long way up there too. So again, this is a good test for all these guys, Rocco Welsh especially, to see if he can claim that number 1 spot.
Well, you look at Rocco Welsh and you see a lot of 2s next to his name. 2 seed, 2 second place finishes at states, a second place finish at Super 32. He's another guy trying to get to the top of the mountain here, and he'll do it as the number 2 seed at 170. Roone Lawrence, I mean, anytime you have a kid who can come in as a freshman, I know he's not an ordinary freshman, and win a state tournament in those upper weight classes, you can see how special he is and how special he can be. He got a nice even temperament to him, and you can see it in tournaments like this. And then just Dom D'Agostino, I mean, I was really impressed at True Power a few weeks ago. To be able to overcome Jake Jones's strength is not anything to sneeze at. Jake Jones has difference-making strength, and Dom D'Agostino was able to wrestle with that, hang with that, and win that match.
Right, and you're right. When I looked at that match on paper, I'm thinking this is going to be a physical match here, and D'Agostino was just, I mean, he was more physical, right? I mean, he just looked like he was in a fight, in a brawl, and he came out on top of that one. Another guy, Kevin Oliveria from Manheim Township. I know you're familiar with him. Big freestyle guy, and he's kind of transitioning towards a folk style. Kind of wrestling is not coming that easy to him, maybe at the folk style level. But man, if he can get everything in order, I think he could be a problem. I know he wrestled pretty tough at the Super Regional. He had Alejandro Herrera the first round, so obviously a tough draw for him. But I think he could probably win a few matches here as well.
Well, I don't remember who the coach was, but at the District 3 tournament, I was familiar with Oliveria, but basically a coach, I think it might have been Chris Haynes from Gettysburg, said more or less this is one of the best athletes he's ever seen. Wow. in a wrestler.
Wow.
So take that. I mean, take that in consideration. I mean, athleticism, it's not much without technique, but in some of these matches, I mean, some of these scramble drills, some of these situations where it's about your hips and your feet and being athletic. I mean, maybe he has a chance to surprise you because of that.
Right. And just because it is that, freestyle focus that has been where he's at. So if you're saying that he's the best athlete, whatever the coach was, that's saying a lot about him and his potential. If you go up to 182, this is kind of an interesting weight here because we got Matt Furman from Cannon Mac, who is the number 16 seed, and Brian Finnerty of Thomas Jefferson. Those two are very familiar with each other. They've wrestled, I think, a dozen times. He's a 26 seed. Two guys from the WPIAL who are very familiar with each other. This is where we don't have anyone in the top 10, in the seeds here. You've got a really deep weight class between, you look at the top 6 here, just a lot of depth here. Matt Furman, I think, has been kind of like what I mentioned about Connor Hare. Furman is a guy who wants to wrestle every week, anywhere, any weight. It doesn't matter. Like he's down to wrestle. And wrestle hard and wrestle really well. So he's going to take some losses, but he's also going to get some pretty big wins. And I think this is a big test for him to say, okay, this is what I'm going to go into this season, and this is my confidence level going into the season. I think, he's a guy who wants to do well, and as he starts doing well, it's just that momentum just keeps on going and going. Finnerty, on the other hand, Eric, that's one of Eric's favorite wrestlers to watch because he looks so cool, calm, and collective out there on the mat. He's another one under the radar, I would say, but has some quality wins. So you look at where these two guys are, it's going to be interesting to see where they end up. In addition to some other big names here, Landon Caldwell from Sagertown, Jagger Gray from Trinity, and Tucker Hogan from Daniel Boone. Tucker Hogan, as a Fargo All-American, I'm very surprised to see him not in the top 32 seeds here. I'm not sure if that was an oversight or maybe he's not wrestling in the Super 32 and Willie knows something I don't. It wouldn't be the first time. But he beat Jagger Gray at True Power this year. Tucker Hogan's probably one of the best wrestlers in his class, and he lost to Finnerty at the Super Regional. So I'm sure he'd like to get his hands on him again, get a little redemption.
I think Tucker Hogan's upside is tremendous, and again, just as I mentioned with Roone Lawrence, trying to make that postseason run as a freshman at the higher weights is just a tough thing to do. But Tucker Hogan looked really good. He looked great a couple weeks ago against Jagger Gray. His length and the size of his arms, the wrestler that comes to mind when I look at Tucker Hogan is Cole Urbis. Long arms, long frame. It's just a lot to try to contend with at a weight at 182 where, you see all different types of body types. Jagger Gray, I just don't think really matched up well with that a few weeks ago, but I think Jagger Gray's been wrestling in everything. I think he's going to turn a corner here pretty soon, and I think he'll be comfortable at 182. Of course, we'll see. It's just not an option for him competing in Pennsylvania, but I think those two guys have a chance, and I really like Tucker Hogan to beat somebody good. And if he's not in it, I mean, you have him as being unseeded and in it still, but I think the best is yet to come. I think you're looking at a state medalist at the least for Tucker Hogan this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that analysis. And just seeing what he did at Fargo this past year and then watching him at True Power, I was very impressed with his development, especially after last year. I can remember when he was an 8th grader at the Surge, knocking off some big names. So I agree with you. State medalist at the least. Let's go up to 195 pounds, where Colby Franklin from Wyoming Seminary is the number 3 seed. Now, this is you got 3, maybe 4 of the top guys in the nation, maybe even pound for pound here at 195 pounds. Chef Shoemate from Ohio, Rylan Rogers, he's there, and Colby Franklin is number 3. Colby's been, I know he was at Penn State, he was at Iowa. Everyone wants him, and for good reason. The guy knows how to wrestle, right? He was a state runner-up when he was at Bishop McCourt, and now he's at Wyoming Seminary, where he's really excelled, right? And he's going to another level. And I apologize, not Bishop McCourt, St. Joseph Catholic Academy is where he was at when he was a freshman, him and Zach Whitmer. I think Colby Franklin is, he's been there, he's been close. Fargo All-American a number of times. it's, go back to that Eric Gibson type thing where you've got a lot of twos beside your name. What are you going to win, right? And I think him coming away with a Super 32 belt here would really solidify him as one of the best guys in the nation, because I can remember him coming up through the youth ranks. I mean, he's coming from Du Bois, like he was one of the best recruits, a heavier recruit coming up through the ranks. And I think, I'm not saying he hasn't reached that potential, but I think he needs to get that quality win. I think he needs to get that quality championship. This could be it, right? Being runner-up to Nick Feldman a number of times, you sometimes want to win, right? You can get second at all the best tournaments, but you still want to win, right? And I think Colby Franklin's coming to the Super 32 to get a belt.
He's in that same category, like Rocco Welsh, Eric Gibson are in that category, guys who have accomplished so much, but still looking to turn a corner. And Colby Franklin's in that category too, just being one of the best guys in every bracket that he's ever been in. I think his turn's coming to try to be the number one guy, and it's a tough field to try to get that done. But certainly, with the schools he's looking at, with his accomplishments and what his potential is, he's definitely right there.
I mean, no doubt about it. No doubt that he's right there. I mean, Rogers is a guy who's been high a number of years in the national rankings. Same with Seth Shoemate. So I'm not saying he's is climbing Mount Everest here. He's in the mix. But this would be a really statement win for him. Other guys in the weights: Quinn Collins from Central Bucks East. He was a state medalist last year, for instance, 6th. Aiden Height from Chambersburg and Johnny Miller from Exeter round out the other guys there. Quinn Collins is probably the bigger name there, being a state medalist. I think Willie only seeded out to 15 with 195. So, those are guys that I think are going to battle. When you get to these heavier weights and the field thins out, I think you're really going to see, some of these guys excel and get on the podium, just because they're in smaller weights, smaller brackets, and they're quality wrestlers, right? 220 pounds. Speaking of thinning out, Pennsylvania only has Hayden Linkerhoff from Corey in the top 15 of the seeds here. He's number 14. Linkerhoff of Corey, 7th in the state last year. He's going to Bucknell. We saw him wrestle Caden Rogers at True Power. Caden Rogers, did what Caden Rogers does, and that's win and physically winning. He kind of took it to Hayden Linkerhoff, but I think Hayden's better off because of it. And I think, he took a lot away from that match despite, kind of a lopsided score there. Caden Rogers is going to Lehigh. He's one of the best in the nation for a reason, so no shame in that. And there's some other guys here that I'm excited to see, and I'll kind of let you, Dustin, talk a little bit more about them. But, this is, again, where you're going to see some guys that maybe you're not too familiar with earn a top 8 finish.
Yeah, I mean, this is a weight class. 220 is always a bit of a wild card, right? There's that's one weight class where I can remember, let me just throw the name Brayden Bauer out there for you. Do you remember Brayden from Mechanicsburg?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And you've seen some other guys who, Adam Geiger is a kid from Trinity who just raw athleticism at 220 pounds can take you a long way. So it's a weight class that kind of opens up because of that. Hayden Linkerhoff, I mean, no shame, Caden Rogers, big, strong, fast, technical. Not a whole lot Hayden Linkerhoff could do with him a few weeks ago. Gettysburg, I love seeing Gettysburg and Chambersburg and some of these, taking guys down there and putting them in a position to get beat up a little bit. Sam Rodriguez, when Sam Rodriguez is at his best, he's a pretty good wrestler. At the very least, a really key, important part of Gettysburg, which they'll be right there in District 3 contention again. But consistency has been an issue, and I think Chris Haynes may be looking to try to knock some of that inconsistency out of him coming down to a tournament like this. So he'll be interesting. I mean, if he wrestles his best, he's a capable kid, long, strong, athletic. So, yeah, we'll see. The 220s are kind of a hard group to try to predict.
Yeah, no, they are, and I agree with you with Rodriguez. Inconsistent, but when he's on, he's on. But he took some losses last year where you're like, how do you lose that? You just beat this guy, right? I mean, I know trying to rank him last year was like, it was hard because you're like, you beat this guy, but you lost to this guy, so we're going to throw you somewhere in the middle. Eli Mackel from Waynesburg, he's kind of continuing to get bigger and bigger. Just curious to see how he is at 220, because I can remember him wrestling 52, 60 a few years back. Nick Pavlichenko from State College, another young kid from State College, M2. I know a lot of people are really, really high on him. He had a good year last year, but kind of in a weird weight class in the Northwest Regional. Bryce Rafferty from Brookville, another, bigger Brookville guy. Colby Whitehill, Nathan Taylor, Bryce Rafferty. Obviously there's something in the water there in Brookville where those big guys, they know how to wrestle. So I think all of those guys that are registered at 220 are going to be in the mix with Hayden to knock off some guys and actually potentially get on the podium. So and the same could be said about 285. So if you go up to 285, Matt Cruz from Easton is the 6th seed. He was 5th in the state last year. We saw him at True Power. He beat DJ Moring from Wyman Seminary. I think Cruz is just, he's got it. Like last year, him and Sean Kinney went back and forth. I think he's in a position now. He's committed to UPenn. I think he's just comfortable. He's ready to rock and roll. He wrestles in literally everything. Every weekend, I think he's wrestled. And that's why he's the number 6 seed here at 285 pounds in a pretty deep weight class. Chase Horn from Georgia is really the top dog here. Cruz, though, I think is going to make a push there for the top 3 finish. And Zach Evans from Chambersburg, I'm pretty big on him. He was on our team at the PA, at the National Freestyle Duels for Team PA Power. Impressed with the way he wrestled. And Leo Mazika from Faith Christian Academy, another one where Leo's been around for a long time. I feel like him and Old Durfer have been around for like 7 years. He's coming up to 285 from 220. So, again, interested to see how he does. And Gavin Thompson from Brockway, I know he's registered for the Surge, so another guy who wants to get that mat time and really get a lot of matches under his belt before the season.
Boy, I tell you what, the 285 weight class last year, at every level you went to, was just an absolute grind. You look at some of the guys who weren't state champions. Matt Cruz, if Sean Kinney, the freshman last year from Nazareth, if he's not there, I mean, who knows where Cruz will be on the podium at all those different spots along the way. Couldn't get out of the way of him. You look at Isaiah Vance and Nate Schoen. I mean, these were really high-level heavyweights last year. And I do believe, Matt Cruz with his broad shoulders, athletic, he's wrestled and everything, as you mentioned. I think he can be a real factor in a tournament like this. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Zach Evans, you're high on him. He was a Fargo All-American. He's making the jump up now to 285 pounds. And Matt Menser is taking both of his big guys down here. Aiden Height as well. They both went out to Fargo. They both made that bus ride home from Fargo back to Chambersburg. Zach Evans got a little hardware. But he, given that he's making this transition and his resume doesn't really scream contender, he's going to be a guy like who's the Bermudian Springs heavyweight last year. Riley Robel from McDevitt also made that leap up to 285.
Right.
Zach Evans won't be quite as dramatic as those two, but I do think that he's got what it takes to be a podium kid there. And I think he's got what it takes. He's got that smaller wrestler mindset for 285 that can be problematic.
Yeah, no, I mean, just watching him in Jersey, Zach Evans, I agree. I think he's definitely going to win a lot of matches because of that. Dustin, this is called the Power Hour. We are at a Power Hour and a half. So we're drinking a little bit more than we should. All right. So we need to cut it off. You're cut off now. I'll go through the Super 32 schedule. Friday are weigh-ins. High school, if you have the VIP early weigh-ins, it's between 3 and 4. Then regular weigh-ins are between 6 and 7 on Friday. Then Saturday, you get up nice and early and you start wrestling at 8 a.m. And you wrestle all the way through. And then Sunday, you start wrestling at 8 a.m. again. Man, that's a long day. Those are long days in that Coliseum. But happy to be back in the Greensboro Coliseum there. So thanks, Dustin. That was a lot of fun. I think you may have frozen halfway through because I don't see you moving on the screen that's on Rockfin. So you may have been just frozen in a weird face like for the last 20 minutes. So if that's the case, I apologize to fans that had to look at your face not moving for a long time. But it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun, Dustin.
There's not a lot of ways that I can freeze that are favorable for me. I recommend like the sun during an eclipse. I wouldn't recommend staring at me for too long.
Could go blind or turn into stone if you know. So
100%.
Of course, you can always check out PA Power Wrestling on Rockfin. We got previews from all the weight classes up through, I think, 145 we're up through right now. I got a bunch of other ones to do here. We got all the list of wrestlers that are registered and seeded, not updated to Willie seeds, but you can see those on Rockfin as well if you go to Matt Scouts. And Dustin, you've got something coming up too that you wanted to mention, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a totally off the cuff, but Penn Live Wrestling Podcast is coming. Basically, I'll be teaming up with Dave Heckard, who coached at Cumberland Valley for 17 years, who just stepped down recently because of some things that he's working through with his family and stuff. But he and I will be getting together every single week just to talk about District 3. So if you're ever curious about what's going on the District 3 wrestling scene, that's the aim, is to try to bring you up to speed in podcast format starting next month. So I'm excited about that.
If you need a guest to come on, who better than a District 3 native than Jeff Upson, right? I'm just saying, if old Heckard wants some company, some CD Cumberland Valley, mixing there. So, and then throw in a guy from Enola, wherever you're from, Susquehanna, I don't know.
All the above, Jeff.
All the above. You're from the river. That's all I can say. Yeah. Dustin, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for tuning in here tonight on the PA Power Hour. You can catch us on replay on Rockfin, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. And don't forget to sign up for the Surge. We forgot to mention that the Surge registration is still open. November 6th in State College at the C3 Sports Complex. It's going to be a great time. You're going to come win a hammer. We've got a high school boys, high school girls, and junior high division. So, make sure you get registered sooner rather than later and come win a hammer. So, Dustin, great talking to you, and hopefully we'll see you soon, okay?
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it. Invite me back if I'm not frozen by then.
You may have to be unfrozen. We may have to call somebody to unfreeze you, but yeah, we'll work on it. There's nothing you can do about your face, but we can work on maybe unfreezing you. All right.
I love it.
All right. Sounds good, Dustin.